Hello, everyone. My name is Raya Morshed.
My name is Yadul Banani.
And my name's Connie Santos.
Today, we will be presenting our object of beauty, Théâtre de Opera Spatial.
Great. So this image here is our object of beauty. It won first place at the Colorado State Fair in 2023, and it caused a huge controversy because it wasn't painted by a human. It was actually created by an AI program called Midjourney. And when Jason Allen, the creator of it, did submit it, he did say it was AI. But when it won, because no one expected it to win, our artists were very furious and they all called it cheating. They said it wasn't real craftsmanship. It said that it's not true beauty because a machine can't create true beauty. So still judges found it stunning and it won. So today we're asking why. And really, what about this image still makes it very beautiful and triggers our aesthetic responses?
That's right, Ziad. So over the next few minutes, we're going to take you through some six major areas, which we'll be starting with the psychological foundations of our AI art, the visual processing of it, the artistic principles that apply to our art, and the emotional and cultural meaning. And then finally, we'll tell you whether the AI art fits any of the traditional theories of beauty. So first, we're going to start with the psychological foundations, and we'll begin with the mere exposure theory, which is very simple. It was discovered by Zhejiang in 1968, and like I said, it's very simple. It's just repeated exposure, and that's what breeds our preference for things. So we generally like things that we've seen before just because that familiarity signals some sort of safety. So this image cleverly combines a lot of familiar elements that we've seen before. So like Baroque architecture in museums and in our history books. And of course, we've seen glowing sci-fi portals in a lot of films in Hollywood, and our brain recognizes these patterns instantly, and that recognition is what makes us feel good about the piece. And so even though this exact image has never really existed before, it's built around a lot of aspects that are familiar to us.
That's awesome. Thank you, Connie. That brings us to our next concept, the processing fluency theory. In the readings, Palmer shows that people prefer visual displays to the extent they are processed easily or fluently. So this image is a masterclass in fluency, as we can see. It has perfect bilateral symmetry. The glowing portal is in the center, which is exactly where Palmer found people prefer focal objects to be. So the high contrast between light and dark makes the edges crystal clear, and the curved arches and flowing drapery create smooth contours, which people prefer. Everything about this makes your brain's job easy. So when processing is easy, the image feels a lot more pleasant.
Yeah, perfect. And part of it being pleasant is Berlin's optimal arousal theory, because we just said that fluency is all about ease, but why do we also enjoy some complexity that comes with it? So Berlin says it's about three types of variables: the collative, the psychophysical, and the ecological. And it's our aesthetic response is strongest when these are optimally balanced. And when these variables increase, the primary reward system becomes increasingly active and generates positive effect. For the collective variables, which is like novelty, complexity, surprise, this comes in the form of it being AI generated. Architecture is layered and complex. For psychophysical, there's the intensity, the brightness, the glowing portal in the middle is very bright. That's a lot of stimulus arousal there. And then third is the meaningfulness through the ecological variable. And despite it being somewhat like fantastical, one might say, it's still recognizable and the architectural space has meaning and the human-like figures are all there as well. So according to Berlin, this image really, for us at least, hits the sweet spot and it's stimulating enough to engage you, but not to overwhelm you. And that's really the optimal arousal.
So next we'll get into the neuroscience and visual processing theories. So first we'll start with the emotion valuation system, and according to a reading by Chatterjee, it involves several regions of our brain, and that contributes to our aesthetic experience. So that would include our orbitofrontal cortex, our ventral striatum, and our anterior cingulate. In Zhejiang's other work, he also argues that affect can precede our cognition. So our emotional response comes first, and seeing things in the art, so the warm colors, the vast scale, and the glowing light, it activates our limbic system, and that activates within milliseconds, and we can't really analyze why it's beautiful. And then lastly, we have the peak shift principle from Ramachandran, who says that artists try not to only capture the essence of something that they, create, but also amplify it to more powerfully activate our neural mechanisms. So the AI image that we chose amplifies pretty much everything. So the grand hall, the very bright light source, and that perfect curve is all considered a super stimulus.
So let's talk about contrast and color then. From a neuroscience perspective, this image brilliantly uses contrast. We put into an edge detector so you can see the areas of high contrast, especially the sharp boundaries between glowing light and darker elements. The papers show that your visual cortex has neurons specifically tuned to detect these edges that we see, Also, we know that the central axis is the most sensitive to contrast, and here the most dramatic contrast is in the central axis. Lastly, for colors, our readings found that as hue contrast increases, preferences increase, which we see here with the warm golds and the orange versus the darker tones in the corners. We also know people prefer colors of high saturation, which this image definitely delivers.
Great, and what we're about to deliver ourselves is a philosophical and anthropological perspective as well. So we're going to get into the sublime first. Shifting to philosophy here, our two main philosophers are Immanuel Kant and Edmund Burke. Burke described the sublime objects overwhelm us and produce awe, while Kant said the aesthetic experiences allows this free play of the imagination. And this image delivers exactly that to us. There's this cosmic architectural scale that creates a very safe encounter with the sublime. The space feels infinite. The portal suggests there's something out there, beyond what we understand as humans, but we're still viewing it like very safely. And we get that thrill of confronting the infinite, but at the same time, there's not much danger, and there's a mixture of awe and wonder that engages our imagination. And that is the sublime experience in its essence.
Perfectly said, Ziad. So next we'll get into the cultural and historical resonance of our piece. So our piece also activates various cultural vocabularies. So going back to Chatterjee, his cultural artifact view, he says that we can really only understand art by appreciating the history and culture behind it. And like we said, this image activates two simultaneously. So again, the Baroque style emerged to really express political power and to inspire awe and really just communicate the divine transcendence. So when you see this grandeur, you're really accessing that cultural history behind that, and combining it with the sci-fi portal that taps into the future that's pretty much unknown to us. And this image really bridges the classical past and our imagined future, and those are both intellectually and emotionally compelling.
Awesome. Thanks, Connie. So with all of that being said, I think it's only fair that we talk about the counter argument too. And that brings us to the authenticity problem. Okay, so far we've shown how nearly every theory successfully explains why this triggers an aesthetic response. But there's a massive problem. If beauty involves appreciating human skill and effort, what happens when a machine only does it in 30 seconds? This is where things get uncomfortable.
Right. So according to Dutton, his art instinct, he argued that art is purely biological and it's a biological instinct. So a huge part of the pleasure that we get from art comes from recognizing and appreciating craftsmanship. But theater, the opera spatial required no hand-eye coordination, no years of training, no physical labor or risk or anything like that, because anyone can really type in a prompt. And so if Dutton is right, then AI art should feel hollow, but for many people, it really doesn't. So this image still evokes powerful responses, even when you know where it comes from.
Perfect. Yeah, and the next person here is Geoffrey Miller, who argues that art evolved as a costly signal, like the peacock tail, where he says is the quintessential example of sexual mate selection. And the tail is beautiful because it's hard to fake and it's an honest signal of beauty the peacocks looked for. So Miller says that human art works the same exact way, that the brain is the same as the peacock's tail. It creates this impressive impression because it requires hard to fake signals like patience, like motor control, like creativity. But AI art has none of that. It breaks that system completely. It's not costly, it's not hard to fake. There's nothing really that signals fitness or sexual selection. So if Miller is right, then AI art should just feel valueless, not beautiful. And that violates this unspoken contract that beauty should be earned in some way.
So we have these two opposing concepts. So how do we resolve this? We think that there are several explanations. First, perceptual systems are separate from meaning making. Your visual cortex responding to contrast doesn't know whether the image took months or milliseconds. It just responds to the visual properties present. Second, prompt engineering is an emerging craft and might be new skill we don't yet recognize. Third, there is evolutionary mismatch since our aesthetic systems evolved when beautiful patterns could only be created through skill and effort. We never faced human-made versus machine-made distinctions.
So our final conclusion is this image activates our aesthetic preferences via everything: symmetry, central composition, novelty, contrast, curvature, color, scale, on and on and on. But the verdict we come to at the end is our perceptual, our philosophical, and our psychological theories all successfully predict and support that the object is beautiful. However, we struggle really with the evolutionary theories, which struggle to explain why we should value the AI-generated beauty and propose the idea that maybe beauty is more about perception than its actual production, because your responses when seeing the image are real, your neural activation is real, the emotions are real, But at the end of the day, whether that experience has the same philosophical weight as human-made art, that is the open question that we still have to battle with. So some of our theories do need updating for the modern AI age, in our opinion.
Of course, this image is beautiful by every measurable perceptual standard that we have, but whether it's beautiful art in the fullest human sense, that's really a question that our current theories highlight, but can't really definitively answer.
And with that, we just want to say
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.